the song Wheels Within Wheels, performed by the British ensemble Penguin Café on NPR's awesome Tiny Desk concert. Now with one foot in classical music and another in pop, this motley crew creates musical landscapes that lead listeners into a surreal, hypnotic world. And I'm joined in the studio by founder Arthur Jeffs. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you recently released a new album. It's called Handfuls of Nights, but the origin of Penguin Café actually starts with your father, so a guitarist and composer, Simon Jeffs. He created a band in the early 70s that was called the Penguin Café Orchestra.
Exactly.
And it's a project that actually came to him in a dream, a fever dream.
Yeah, I mean, it was this. I think the story changed every time with, because he was having fun telling it. But the basic idea was that he had some food poisoning in the early 70s in south of France and had a 2-day fever.
Oh, God.
And had this kind of waking dream about a sort of dystopian near future where everyone lived in concrete blocks with little lenses in the top corner, kind of quite 1984. And then and everyone spent all their time looking at screens. And in one room, you saw a musician with lots of equipment making music, but he had headphones on, so no music in the room. And in another room, a couple making love lovelessly and soundlessly. And this was a very dehumanized world. But you could
Sounds really similar to our world.
Yeah, no, it's strangely prescient. And then you could reject that and look further afield. And down the road, you'd find the Penguin Café, which is a sort of chaotic, noisy, sort of folk food restaurant where like light and noise pours out into the night, and you can go in and there's always like the cups make themselves lighter if you're tired, so you can drink your wine, and it's sort of a magical place. And there's a band in the back playing music that you think you've heard somewhere but you don't know where, and so that's the Penguin Café Orchestra.
And so your father passed away in 1997,
yes.
And 10 years later you got his band back together to perform a series of memorial concerts, and you decided to keep the project going as Penguin Café. Was that a way to keep his legacy alive? Yeah,
well, it was just so nice to hear the music in a live context again, and I felt like once we'd kind of started pulling on the thread, it was very difficult to stop. And so I didn't actually carry on playing with my dad's band. I started. Well, it was a sort of slower process than that. I just started playing with a few friends. Bits and bobs, at friends' parties and stuff. And then once we started doing it, it snowballed very quickly. And so within 6 months of doing our first tentative steps, we were playing at Glastonbury and the ICA, and it was amazing.
That's amazing. And so we're going to actually listen to a song. So this is off your latest album. It's called Chapter. Take a listen. Beautiful song. Now, Penguin Café is a very eclectic collective that features kind of a varying number of people. It kind of goes against the protocol of having a fixed band with fixed instruments and everything. Is that a deliberate choice for you?
I think so. I think the ethos that my dad worked out in the first Penguin Café Orchestra, I think, was to make sure that you don't get too pinned down to a particular genre or a particular lineup. So you've got the freedom to experiment with things and and go in one direction really hard this year, and then next year try something quite different. And I think that's important, especially since we're a second generation of a project already. I think we need to be able to keep it loose.
Keep it moving. And so your songs are very hypnotic. You've got these very rich layers and loops of different instruments intertwining. Do you compose collectively with this motley crew, or do you do it on your own and then come back to them? How does it work?
A bit of both. I mean, so I'll write the core pieces and then bring them to the studio, and we'll then sort of spend a period of time just laying layers on top of layers, and then sort of from that you then sort of start carving back. So you sort of sculpt them from the kind of block. Yeah. Once you've recorded everything, and then if sometimes you'll then need to go back and re-record that. But yeah, it's sort of quite an iterative composition process.
And now many of the songs on your album actually reference penguins, the animal. You've got Life of an Emperor, Gen 2 Origin. What is it about penguins that fascinates you?
Well, it seemed appropriate. Also, there was a project we did with Greenpeace at the end of 2018, where it was a campaign to protect the oceans around Antarctica. And then now that's sort of morphed into the larger campaign to protect the oceans around the world. And we did a concert in London, in Hackney, where at the core around which we built the whole thing was these 4 pieces representing the 4 penguins that live in Antarctica properly, full time. And so we just spent a lot of time on YouTube, and Greenpeace had lots of footage as well. And just kind of work out the differences between the penguins and how to translate that into music.
Amazing. And so you were talking about the South Pole, but you also went to the North Pole.
I
You
did.
went on an expedition. So this was in 2005. It was inspired by the Scott expedition to the South Pole. Did that experience in the North Pole inspire your music?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, well, all this footage that we had from Greenpeace that we just had on in the studio the whole time, it really reminded me of the time we spent in Greenland up on the ice cap. And it was, that was when I kind of really decided to do music properly, when I was 25 or something. And it was just these endless days of silence walking along. So if a non-windy day, it's the most silent place I've ever been or anything. And so I started to hear music in my head, sort of as a way of not going mad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was sort of a real sort of defining moment, I think, for me.
Sounds very inspiring. We should perhaps all go to the North Pole to find inspiration.
I heartily recommend it.
We're going to move on to some other music news that's grabbing headlines. And the 62nd Annual Grammy Awards were held in Los Angeles. And the big winner of music's biggest night was actually 18-year-old Billie Eilish. She crashed onto the scene with her debut album, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?, which she actually made in her bedroom with her brother, Phineas O'Connell. And she took away 5 awards, including all the major awards. So Best New Artist, Record of the Year, Album of the Year, and of course, Song of the Year for her very addictive hit, Bad Guy, which in case you haven't heard it, well, here it is.
So you're a tough guy, like you really rough guy. Just can't get enough guy, just always so puff guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. I'm the bad guy.
Duh.
I'm the bad guy.
It's a really deserved win for Billie Eilish there. Are you a fan of hers?
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, she's fantastic.
Yeah. And were there any other Grammy winners that you're excited about?
Yeah, I saw 2 for Chemical Brothers.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely an interesting night. Now, it was unfortunately cloaked in sadness, of course, the Grammys following the death of the basketball legend Kobe Bryant. Bryant died in a helicopter crash with his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, mere hours before the show, and his shadow loomed over the ceremony, which was actually held at the Staples Center, in which he played for the Los Angeles Lakers for over 20 years. Tributes really rained throughout the ceremony. And on the red carpet, let's listen to legendary Smokey Robinson reflecting on Kobe Bryant's death.
Kobe was my friend. And my wife woke me up this morning and told me I could not believe it, first of all. And to find out that it was really true. And then as a dad myself, to find out that his daughter was there with him and there was nothing he could do for her. My God. It's horrible. I'm sorry. It's a drag.
Now, that's all we have time for. Thanks so much for joining us. And I want to thank you, Arthur. Thank you for being on the show today. You're actually going to play us out with a version of the song off your album, Life of an Emperor. But for more arts and culture news, you can, of course, head to our website. Stay in touch on social media and stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up right after this.